Good morning, or afternoon or night, depending on when you're watching this video. Welcome to my video on how to cook for a class size. So this is for teachers or parents out there who need to cook for about 24 students. So please ignore the construction sounds going around my house if you hear them. We have a lot of construction happening. But welcome to my kitchen, and today we're going to be making a butternut squash pie. So instead of pumpkin pie, we're going to be using a squash to make our pie. Very similar flavors, a little bit different. A lot of people who don't like pumpkin pie like squash pie, so that might tell you something. The first step to cooking is having a cup of tea with you and preheating your oven. So the first thing we're going to want to do before I get into ingredients, we're going to preheat our oven. So we're thinking the recipe calls for preheating the oven at 350 Fahrenheit. So I'm going to go and do that. Right now my big oven is broken, so we're going to use my little toaster oven, but they work the same. I'm just going to preheat it at 350 and I'll start it. So I've preheated my oven. That's the first step. The next step we're going to do, we're going to start this session with just getting the butternut squash ready for our pumpkin. So we can't, our pie, we can't just throw this in the pie and hope it works. We first have to make a puree. You can also buy cans of squash puree or pumpkin puree, but today we're going to do it with a real squash and make our own puree. So you're going to need a blender or a food processor to make the puree. You're going to need a pan, some parchment paper or just oiling the pan, and a peeler and a knife to cut your squash. So why don't you get started on that and we will regroup. Okay, so the one thing that I did forget is to say that we will need some butter. You only need about 1 tablespoon of unsalted butter. If you don't have unsalted butter, you could just use salted butter and not add the salt in later into the pie filling, so it's up to you. We're going to get started with peeling our squash. So what you want to do is you want to take the peeler, take the squash, probably should have a cutting board, but that's up to you, and just peel your squash. So it's a little bit tough. It's not like peeling a potato. So you can also use a knife. But it's working out for me. You can also use a different type of peeler. So this is another one. This is the one I was using. This one might work better. Oh, there we go. So I recommend using one like this or something like it. Anyways, peel your pumpkin and then we'll move on to the next phase. Okay, so I forgot to mention, but I'm pretty sure all of you wash your hands. I washed my hands before. You want to wash your hands between anything you're doing, just to make sure you're keeping clean, especially during the times. Yeah, so another thing, hair up to keep it out of the way. And we're going to start chopping our squash. So, or cutting. So you want to cut this part off, the hard part. We don't want to cook that. So you'll just chop it off. I'm using a big sharp knife. Probably any sharp knife would work. I just like the big ones, they're fun. And then you probably want to cut this part off, just the hard little pieces. So make sure you have your fingers back here and you can cut down. There we go. So now you have each side, and then you're going to cut the squash in half. So we're going to do that. So you can do it like this, or you can do it a safer way, lying vertically. This was just the easiest way that I thought of doing it. Okay, make sure you have your fingers out of the way and cut down. There you go. So now you've got your squash cut in half. I know I was calling it a pumpkin earlier. This is definitely a butternut squash, as you read in the recipe that is attached to the video. So next thing you're going to do, as the recipe says, is we're going to scoop out the seeds. So probably want a spoon for that. Okay, so now that we've scooped out the insides of our squash, they're ready for the pan. So we're just going to grab our pan, and I've got some parchment paper lined on mine. You don't need to do that. That's just my preference. So got one, and the other. So this is sort of what it looks like. And then you're going to take some butter. I unfortunately don't have unsalted butter, so I'm just going to do salted butter. But you don't need to. So it calls for about 1 tablespoon of butter. I'm just going to cut a bit off, but you're welcome to measure it. And you're just going to put some butter on your squash, and it'll be ready to go into the oven. We're going to put it in the oven for about 30 to 40 minutes. Just check to make sure when it's fork tender, and then we will put it in the blender or the food processor for cooking and making a puree, and then we can put it in the pie and mix it with all those ingredients. Again, this is cooking for a large amount of people. A pie usually yields to about 8 to 10 people, so we're probably going to want to do 2, so we're going to double the recipe. So we're going to do this again with the squash, and we're going to double the recipe for the dry ingredients and wet ingredients like the sugar and the milk. So catch me there. Okay, so I'm putting my squash into the oven, and I'm going to start a timer. See you in about 30 to 40 minutes, and we'll make the puree. Okay, so while our squash is cooking, I'm going to dive into a little bit what it's like to cook for a class size. So when you're cooking for a class size, most recipes aren't going to come in the amount for 24 people unless maybe it's brownies or something like that. But usually it's about 8 to 12. With a pie, you're going to have about 8 to 12 slices depending on how you cut it. So thinking about that, you probably want to double the recipe. So there's a lot of resources out there where you can find how to double it, or just do the math and double each cup size and tablespoon. So that's what we're doing here today. We're doubling everything to make a little bit more. So 2 squashes instead of 1, and etc. If you are a teacher and you want to teach us in the class, I would highly suggest, at least for young students, having the squash pre-cut. Then the students can butter it, put it in the oven. This is definitely something you could do without them if you just want to come with the puree ready for them. But if you want to show them how to make the puree, definitely you can have them butter the squash, put it in the oven, have it come out of the oven, and then together you can put it in a food processor or blender and make their puree. Then when each student has puree, you can divide the puree among the students. So you should divide sort of the ingredients for the whole pie by the amount of miniature pies you're going to make. So if that makes any sense, you can also look up some recipes for miniature pies, really great ones out there. You can make the pie crust yourself, or you can go and buy miniature pie crust at the store. They sell little miniature pie tins, and also you can just put those in a muffin top for the oven. So you have a couple options. Making pies is great for cooking with the class because you don't need an oven, or well, you do need an oven, but you don't need a stovetop for each student. So they can mix their ingredients together and make the pie filling, pour it into their pie, and then together as a class you can put it in an oven, and then when they come out they're ready. So a nice simple one for many students. If you're just a parent or you're just going to be cooking for your class, then definitely doubling the recipe, and yeah, making sure you're washing your hands through each stage. So I'm done with this. I'm probably going to wash my hands for the next part. Well, I'm going to wash my hands for the next part because I might be doing little things in the middle. And keeping your hair up, and definitely keeping a clean kitchen. And making yourself another cup of tea. Okay, so after you've roasted your squash, you're going to cut it up and you're going to go and put it in your blender. It can be straight out of the oven hot, and you can also put it in your food processor. So that's what I did, and then you just sort of keep processing it until it is silky and smooth. So I have sort of a puree there, kind of like looks like the one you get out of the can. You can wait till it cools, or you can just go straight for it. So what the recipe says is you're going to put 2 cups into a large mixing bowl. So we're going to go ahead and do that. You can use a spatula to scoop it out. I've got half a cup here, so if you have a full cup, go ahead and use that. My full cup has my milk in it. You probably want to have your ingredients ready, so I have my milk poured, my sugar, and my eggs, nutmeg, cinnamon, ginger, cornstarch all ready to go. This is the fun part where we mix the ingredients together. You can use a spatula to get it out, you can use a spoon. It might be easier with a spoon. I'm using a spatula though. Okay, once you've gotten all of your squash, 2 cups, into the bowl, you're going to set it aside. So for a larger number of people, you want to double that to 4 cups, so you can have 2 pies, which we will be doing in a minute. So then you want to, in a medium mixing bowl, combine the brown sugar, the cornstarch, the cinnamon, the ginger, the nutmeg, and the salt, and stir to combine. If you did salted butter, you don't need to add salt. So I already did salted butter with the squash, so I'm not going to add the salt. So yes, I'm going to start with the brown sugar. So I got a 3/4 cup. Remember to double this. Then I'm going to add the cornstarch. So just reading the ingredients. You want 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. So I just have this brand here. Add it in. Great. Then you're going to want a teaspoon of cinnamon. I have the Costco kind. Any kind of cinnamon works well. And you can knock it about everywhere. So here's 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. And you want 1/4. So also have a fourth one here. I like to just take the lid off to get it out. Then you're going to do half a teaspoon of nutmeg. So you can go ahead and grab your nutmeg. I just have the selection nutmeg from Metro. You can pick it up wherever you have a store nearby. So there's the nutmeg. And you want a 3/4 teaspoon of ginger. So I'm going to go and find my other teaspoons. And then I have ginger. There you can see it. So 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. And then you can smell it. It smells good. So with that, you're going to stir this to combine. So you can just use one of your little spoons and stir it. You can also use a fork to stir it. I just like using the least amount of dishes as I can. You're going to have a few bowls. You want to break them up. I might actually trade this in for the spatula. Spatula. This is a mixer. Okay, so you keep going until you get all the little bubbles out of there and it's nicely mixed together. So I like to hit it down to the bottom to break those hard chunks up. It should start smelling nice and like fall. Okay. So you will leave that and you're going to go back to your bowl of squash and you're going to add your 2 eggs and the vanilla. So you can just crack them on the side of the bowl and put it in. There we go. And you can stir that together. Half a teaspoon of vanilla. I like to just eye it. Put a little bit of a drop in. There we go. You can have too much vanilla, but it's very hard to have too much vanilla. 1 or 2 drops is always a good amount. Now, it'll be very sticky with the eggs, so it's going to be hard to stick them together, so you just have to work at it for a bit. So keep folding it on top of itself. And the egg and vanilla should incorporate into the butternut squash. The folding technique works really well. You'll have a nice liquidy texture. All right. Once you've mixed all of the eggs and the vanilla together, you're going to move on to adding the sugar mixture into the squash mixture. So I'm probably going to add half mixed and then add another half. So there's about half, and then you're going to mix it. Again, just folding it in. Add the second half. And continue stirring it. You can do this in an electric mixer. I actually have one, but sometimes it's nice to do things by hand, so that's why I'm doing that today. If you're making a big batch, you'd probably want to make it in a bigger bowl. So when we double it, you want a bigger bowl. All right. Now it should have turned to a brown sort of mixture versus the yellow. You can see the different colors right here on the bowl. It's starting to look like the color of pumpkin pie, but squash pie for us. It's nice to use products that are in season when you're cooking. Keeps things local, keeps things fresh. Okay, so I think that's good for me. And then the last thing is to add the milk and slowly stir it in. So I'm going to start with my half cup. So actually I have here is a half and half, so it's half cream, half milk. It'll give your pie a bit of a creamier taste if you would rather that. So there's the half cup. Stir it in. It's starting to smell delicious. Well, this is my first time trying squash pie. I'll let you know if it is better or similar to pumpkin pie. I'm very interested. I'm a big fan of pumpkin pie. Today I'm making squash pie because I'm going to a potluck, and the potluck is based around squash, beans, and corn. Okay, I'm going to add about half of my half cup, or full cup. Okay. Ooh, some of it might splash out at you. Careful. Okay, and then you'll just keep making this with the milk, and you should have your pie filling, and then we'll get out our pie. Okay, once you finish mixing your filling, you're going to get out your pie crust. I just use a store-bought one. especially when you're doing it for large groups and other people. You just don't have the time to make that. You can make your own. There are definitely lots of recipes out there that you can look up for how to make a pie crust, but I just buy the tender flake ones from the grocery store. I've got the oven preheating at 350, and you're just going to take your fork and prick the bottom and around. So you just take the fork and you prick your pie crust. This makes sure that the pie doesn't inflate when you're cooking. If without the holes, it would have air bubbles and air pockets, which would ruin your pie. So you want to make sure that you're getting all of those. And then you just want to go around the sides. Takes a bit of time, kind of starts looking cool though. There's my oven, it's done preheating. Okay, so this is what it'll look like if you can see the little holes there that I've pricked in my pie crust. Okay, once you've pricked all your holes in the pie crust, you're going to put the pie filling in the pie. So we'll take this. Okay, so you'll put quite a bit in and just move it around. So once you have your full pie, you're going to put it on your baking sheet and you're going to stick it in the oven, and it's going to take about an hour to, let's double check our recipe, an hour to an hour 15, hour 20. So as you can see, I still have some left in here, so I'm going to take my second pie and put it in right after. As I have a very small oven, I can only fit one at a time, but if you have a bigger oven, you can fit two at a time. And after your hour and 15, 20 minutes, you can check to make sure that the center is not too wobbly. Once that's good and it looks, not too liquidy, you can pull it out and enjoy. So I'll meet you back here when we have our our pies out of the oven. Okay, now that we have our pies out of the oven, you can see that one is a little bit black. That's because I put the rack a little bit too high on the first time. So making sure that your pie is nice in the middle of the oven and not too close to any of the burners. It still tasted great, even though it went a bit black on top, so that's fine. And then you can also see my pie ready to go to the potluck. I hope you enjoy yours.